what's the number one objection that every salesperson on the planet gets?
I got to think about it, or
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
How much?
Yeah, how much? Yeah.
Or even more, I like it, but the price is too high.
Yeah.
That's a real common one. And then we immediately go into trying to justify and rationalize why the price is what it is, right? And now you've commoditized the product.
Yeah.
As opposed to, again, back to these questions in communication, I'll say, but I'm curious, is price the only criteria that you're using to make a decision?
Yep.
And everybody like, well, no, exactly. So whether it's $1 or $1 million, if it's not going to work out. So help me understand what's really most important around this decision. What's the criteria you're using? And then you can start establishing value in your questions as opposed to just kind of making yourself like everybody else. We're the best.
Welcome back to another episode of the Sales Gravy Podcast. With me is my friend Brian Parsley. And Brian is an incredible keynote speaker. If you've never heard him, I hope that he shows up to your sales kickoff meeting, because this guy is a total badass speaker. Brian and I met backstage at an event that I was doing, and we instantly fell in love because we have a similar message and a similar philosophy when it comes to sales. Now, before we get started, I want you to go check out Sales Gravy University. Sales Gravy University is the most powerful sales training engine on earth, and it's where thousands of companies and salespeople come to learn the art of selling. And if you've never taken a course before on Sales Gravy University, or you want to check it out for your entire team, go to learn.salesgravy.com, learn.salesgravy.com, and use the code FREECOURSE. This is for first-time users only. Use the code FREECOURSE at learn.salesgravy.com. Brian, welcome to the Sales Gravy Podcast.
Great to be here. And like you said, it was really neat because obviously, like you, I travel around and do talks, and it was nice that I did my keynote, you did your keynote, and I thought, wow, it's almost like we're working together in sync here.
It was great. I sat in the back of the room and watched you, and you were a man who has mastered the art of connecting with an audience. It was magical. And that's really where I want to go today in this podcast, is because you are a communicator, and you are an expert at communication. You teach people how to communicate. And I want to start with a basic, which is, why is communication such a crucial art in today's modern world?
You know, there's really, from my experience, there's two predictable outcomes that you can count on. One is a competitive advantage, and that is really far and few between, because with everything out there now, if you really slice and dice, there's not that big of a delta or difference. But the biggest differentiator from a predictable outcome is human behavior, and that begins with communication. And I think it stems from even as a child. Everybody has these really wonderful notions of getting along with people. So your mom and dad would say something like, talk to people the way, and then you want to be talked to, right? Or treat people the way you want to be treated. But the reality is there's a juxtaposition to that. The reality is you have to talk to people the way they need to be talked to. Yep. If you're going to connect and build rapport. There's 5 basic pillars here anyway. You know, you got respect, trust, rapport, credibility, and likability. And those pillars are all based on communication.
Yeah, if you think about that, that's sort of like the platinum rule of communication, right? So it's you want to communicate with people in the format in which they are communicating. One of the things that I teach salespeople is that everybody's got their own communication style. And those styles are direct, they're indirect, they're consensus building, they're energizing, especially people who are like in CFO positions. They're very like particular about every little thing in the communication and how it's lined up, very linear versus nonlinear. But sure. I do teach salespeople that the truth is that style doesn't really matter when your mouth is shut. It only matters when you're talking. Like, you've got to speak their language to get them to pay attention to you.
Correct. Yeah. Was there, I think you're spot on there. It's interesting. And I'd like to maybe just add something to that. But when we really look at from sales, a lot of times someone could have a competitive advantage around their solution. It could be very dynamic, even better than anybody else. But when it comes down to it, if you just start talking about your solution and showing them like the features and the benefits. The problem is it doesn't differentiate you from anybody else. Questions, not solutions, is what drives that forward. But to your point, and you can use the DISC model that was developed by Dr. William Marston back in the 20s, and that was based off the works of Carl Jung, a famous, psychologist. Is that those styles you're talking about, whether you replace the word driver, direct, influence, or compliance, or it all comes down to understanding: are they fast paced? Give me the bottom line, relationship driven, or are they a bit more analytical and process focused? And the questions you ask that goes through any of these processes is going to determine how long you have their ear. And more importantly, do you have their commitment?
And I think that it's fascinating. Like if you were to be able to go give each of your customers a DISC profile before you had a conversation with them,
Yeah.
you would, I mean, you'd be able to go, oh, well, this is how you like to communicate. You're a D, you're an I, you're an S, you're a C. In our practice, we used the acronym ACE, which is Analyzer, Energizer, Director, Analyzer, Consensus Builder, Energizer, Director. And we just use different names because it's easier. But it'd be nice to be able to do that. But sometimes you got to figure that out on your own. Like you've got to look at the cues. And I think that what salespeople sometimes that don't give themselves enough credit for is their ability to very quickly understand how someone's communicating if they're observing. But it feels like sometimes we're so self-centered, like we're so focused on what we are going to say that we don't take time just to listen to the unspoken cues. And one of the things that you say is that body language, for example, is way louder than words. How do salespeople in the moment with a buyer, in the moment with a stakeholder, really open themselves up to understand how that other person likes to be communicated with?
That's a great question. And it's actually one I posed to Danielle. She's our psychologist on staff here. And it was a two-part. I asked that exact same question. Here's what she said: don't confuse communication and behaviors with EQ. EQ is actually something that can be learned even as an adult. And that's that sensory acuity, those type of things, situations. But as it relates to body language, 55% of body language is communication, right? 38% is tonality. So, gosh, you look at that, only 7% are the words. Now, through observation, the beautiful thing about behaviors is it's an observable language. I don't know why you do what you do. I can't observe that. I don't know your worldview or self views, but I can tell you how you choose to consume and deliver information just through watching. And it may sound hokey. It's funny. I was in South Africa the last 2 weeks, and yesterday I just came back last night, and I was on my British Airways flight from Johannesburg to London. And I was talking to one of the flight attendants, 11-hour flight, and you were just in Africa, it's far. And here's what was really funny. The lady was really super nice, and then this other lady started standing back there. Another flight attendant started staring, and she asked a couple little questions. So when she went away, I said, "Let me see if you know her well." She goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Let me see if I understand her." She follows the rules. Doesn't care what people think. She's, if you don't, it's black and white with her. She's probably a little bit gruff with customers. And she's like, "Do you know her?" And then there was another gentleman that came back again. We were having a conversation. So flight attendants were coming and going. And I said, "This guy hates conflict, really relationships." She goes, "Yes, that's him." So I think that a lot of times we try to rush in and put a label on someone. And that's the danger zone for any sales professional.
Well, I mean, if we think about selling, we talk all the time about listening and doing a better job of listening, but listening isn't just a single siloed activity. It's multi-directional. So you're listening with your eyes, like what you see, you're listening with your ears, what you hear, and you're listening with your intuition. And it sounds to me like over the years, because you are a communication expert, that you've honed that ability to be intuitive about what you're seeing and observing in people. And I think that far too many times salespeople are only listening with their ears, what's coming through, and that's usually the words that people are saying versus how they're actually saying those words. What's the What's the secret or what's the technique that you can use to turn on all of your senses when you're engaging buyers, whether it's on a prospecting call or in a discovery meeting, engaging them to pay attention to what they're actually saying and what language connects with them?
Wow. It reminds me that knowledge is not power, and having that secret is not a guarantee, because if knowledge was power, we'd all have six packs and be billionaires. I think it's a habit of putting these things into play. And I think one of the downfalls isn't so much the ability of, like, what you say is so easy and clear and clairvoyant, that just listen, observe, and then take it in and kind of figure it out before you speak. But the problem is that we're constantly trying to compare. Like, I want to impress Jeb. I want him to like me. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? And then my greatest strength, which is connecting and communicating, becomes my greatest weakness, because I don't know when to shut up. And we lose sight of that. And I think that the worst is not even how I put a label on what I think Jeb is, but I put a label on myself, what I believe I am. And also, I think we need to be very transparent and say, literally this weekend it happened. My wife said this. This is going to be public domain now. She said, for a world-class communicator and people pay you a lot of money to help them, you can't figure it out at home. And it wasn't an insult. It was the fact that sometimes we get so comfortable. I know what I'm supposed to do, but you're dealing with teenage daughters. Sometimes you lose sight of that. And it's because we get emotionally involved and attached. And at work, I'm not emotionally attached. So it becomes much easier to look at it that way. But we're human. We're defective. We screw up. I'm broken. And we need to be okay with that and just say, what can I learn and what must I change?
That's a really good point. I think that because I had my wife and I had a little bit of row last night over something with my wife and I work together, like you and your wife work together. So we had a big row around something, and I'm thinking, why did I get in a fight with her over this, where I would never get in a fight with anybody else over that? And you're right. We're so emotionally attached in the moment. And I'm like you, selling is, to me, like, it's a second sense. Everything slows down. And it's the one place where I can be completely emotionally detached. And I've taught myself that over time. So when I sit down with someone, I start our sales meetings like, just tell me what's going on. And they talk. And I'll often have someone talking for 30 minutes before I ever say anything. So I'm giving myself, through discovery, through the questions that I ask, lots of time to observe their behaviors and to listen to their words. And I'm very careful to repeat those words back to them. I've always believed that the most powerful story that you can tell someone is the story that they just told you about themselves, because that tells them that you're listening and that you care. And I'll go back and say, I heard you say this, this, and this. And I watch their body language while I'm saying it to see, are they responding to that type of communication? Whereas at home, when I'm emotionally attached to something, I'm not paying attention to any of the body language. I'm just hearing the words and I'm responding and reacting to the words without stopping to think there probably could have been a better way of handling this than the way that I just did. So I think I really think that's powerful, and it's profound if we think about that. So as a salesperson, if we're listening what Brian's teaching, one of the things that we need to do before we walk into a deal is detach from the outcome. Now, you hear me talking about this a lot because I believe that the secret to detaching from the outcome is to have a full pipeline. Because if you have a full pipeline and you have lots of options, it doesn't make a difference if one deal or the other falls out, you're going to win. So that way you can step back. And that's usually been my secret for building that in. Brian, you also say that to be an effective communicator, and I think these two things tie together, this ability to be aware, to emotionally detach. You said that it's important that you understand your own purpose or your own why. And that's not something you hear a lot of people say. Like, to be a better communicator, you got to understand who you are first. Usually it's, to be a better communicator, you got to understand what words you need to say. So completely opposite than what we normally talk about. Can you dive into this concept?
Very simply, ego is not your amigo.
Okay. I've heard you say that before.
And I think and I know it oversimplifies it, but there's also some elegancy and simplicity. We get frustrated with the ones we love or close to because our ego gets hurt and we get in the way of that. And I think at the end of the day, Jeb, there's never going to be a technique. I think it comes down to a willingness from your side to want to give solutions. Now, you mentioned something that I think is extremely powerful, and I hope people didn't miss this. We need to, when somebody approach, whether it's a challenge, a pain, a question, we always want to respond, but redirect it, not to deflect, not respond to deflect, respond to redirect. So I call it to like peel back the onion a little bit to understand a little bit deeper. I'll give you an example. Let's say someone says to you, hey, I'm really interested in what you're selling, but how quickly can we get it executed? The number one thing a salesperson says, because they're thinking, I'm making a sell, they're going to say, oh, well, we can get that right away. Or, hey, we have a challenge, working with you guys, because in the past, our rep, she just did a really terrible job with communicating. Oh, well, it's different now because that's how we get into that. Not because we're trying to puke on them, but because we truly want to serve them. Where we're challenging people to do is think a little different and say, how can I redirect to understand the pain or the challenge behind it? So, hey, how quickly will it take to get this thing going? We can talk about rollout, but I'm curious, Jeb, what's driving the urgency in that question? And so when you can redirect a conversation like that, what it does is it enables you to have not just more insights, but it's also going to put you in control. And you said it, I like to open up, what's going on? That's what a good doctor always starts with that. So what's going on today? Even though they know, because you already told it, you wrote it down, you told the nurse, they still want to hear from your perspective. And we do that. Now imagine if we were dating, gosh, and you could use these techniques. Like it's totally different when, by the way, not just a technique, I'm talking about when you said having options. You don't come across so desperate when you have 5 other potential people on there. I'm not going to call 6 times a day. And I'm not suggesting we do hard to get where we have arrogance that comes in, but people can smell desperate breath pretty far away.
This idea of someone says something and you step back and redirect it with a deeper level question, or even better, just gaining some understanding. Like someone says, how quickly can we do this? And you say, help me understand what's driving your urgency. There's 2 things that happen there for me. One is it shows that you are in control. It demonstrates a phrase that we use here, relaxed, assertive confidence. So you're not just so eager to jump in, and that pulls people in. So it's almost a takeaway. Like when you said earlier that human beings are predictable, right? Human beings, if you take something away, they want it more, right? So when they say, when can you get this done? You go, well, hey, what's driving your urgency? Even though it's a nuanced takeaway, it still draws them in toward you. And then you step back and understand what's driving that actual urgency, which makes you a stronger closer. Because back to what I said earlier, when you tell that story back to them about their urgency and bridge to let's get this thing inked, it's much more powerful and it's much more likely to result in ink versus the person saying, okay, send it over to my office. And then you get ghosted and it sits for 2 months while you're chasing them down.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, the other day we were talking to someone and she's like, well, maybe we could just do a proof of concept to start. Instead of saying, gosh, that's great, let's try, being able to, again, unpack that and say, I'm curious, why a proof of concept? What about that makes sense? Well, what if they don't get adoption? That's the real objection. It's not proof of concept. And it gives you that ability to address that more directly and overcome that objection before it becomes the stall. Because the stall that you just mentioned is the kiss of death.
Yeah. And by the way, you don't do that when you're desperate. When you really need it, you're just like, okay, I'll take the proof of concept. But with some experience, by the way, you also know that when anybody's like doing the proof of concept or the pilot, that's also the kiss of death usually.
Oh, one more thing, Jeb. What's the number one objection that every salesperson on the planet gets? You know the answer. The biggest one.
I got to think about it, or
that's a good one.
Yeah.
How much?
Yeah. How much? Yeah.
Or even more. I like it, but the price is too high.
Yeah.
That's a real common one. And then we immediately go into trying to justify and rationalize why the price is what it is, right? And now you've commoditized the product.
Yeah.
As opposed to, again, back to these questions in communication, I'll say, but I'm curious, is price the only criteria that you're using to make a decision?
Yep.
And they'll be like, well, no, exactly. So whether it's $1 or $1,000,000, if it's not going to work out. So help me understand what's really most important around this decision. What's the criteria you're using? And then you can start establishing value in your questions as opposed to just kind of making yourself like everybody else. We're the best.
Let's take a step back, because we've been talking about this concept of really listening and understanding and awareness and changing the way that we communicate through observation. But you use two words when it comes to words. You use the word precision and eloquence when you're talking, when you're explaining things. Walk me through the 7% of the time when words are driving communication. Why do words need to be precise, and what does eloquence mean in your communication?
Well, when I say there's elegance and simplicity, number one, we try to impress people with how smart we are with big words. We just don't need to do that. I don't need to say, when I'm examining the juxtaposition, I would postulate that we don't need to do that. That's like me walking into the doctor's office and them going through their credentials on the wall. Like, I can see it. You're a doctor. I don't need you to prove that to me, right? Just use common words. When we think about the words we do use, I think we need to be selective, especially in text or written communication, because people can certainly read things differently than our intent. And quite frankly, we're not judged based on our intent. We're judged based on not even what we say, but how people perceive that. And that's why we must be I'll give you an example. Let's say that you're having a row. I've never heard that before, by the way. I love that. You're having a row with your wife, and let's say that you said you were going to be home at 5, and something came up at your office. I mean, you are a world-renowned, speaker trainer, so you got on a client call. You get home at 6, and she said you committed that you were going to be here at 5 o'clock. And it's like, yeah, but this came up and, I had to do this. This is a big deal. You betrayed me. That one word, betrayed is I was on a date.
Yeah.
Not I was 50 minutes late to be home. I should have communicated with you, as opposed to if she said, when you make a commitment like that, I was counting on you, and it really hurt my feelings. Because the difference between the two, you're going to get defensive on that first one. What do you mean betrayed you? That's the ego, because she just attacked your character, versus I let you down. I would never want you to feel that way, love. Yep. And it changes it up. So that's why words are so incredibly important. So whenever you say to someone, I'm sorry you feel that way, I'm sorry you feel that way, you're basically discounting that feeling that they have, that it's not right. It's in fact, you're wrong to even have that, versus I would never want you to feel that way. So it's just kind of a nuance, but it really makes a huge difference in communicating.
So it really is, when you start thinking about what you say or what you write, it's really being intentional and taking the time. I had a boss once, a brilliant sales master. His strategic ability to look at deals and advance deals forward was really world renowned. I mean, everybody knew how good he was. But one of the things that I learned from him was, we would put together a presentation or proposal. We would take weeks. We would work with a paragraph and get it down to 5 words. We would rework the words and rework the words to make sure that what our intent was, what we were trying to communicate, was exactly what was communicated. Mm-hmm. And that's an art, and it takes a lot of, discipline. I do it today. I'll spend a weekend working on one proposal. I worked on one the other day ago that my team got halfway done, and I said, this is going to take me 30 minutes. I ended up spending 3 hours on it, just reworking the sentences and taking words out, and very much like you might edit a book. But to both be simple, succinct, eloquent, and precise to make sure that what was being communicated was communicated.
Yeah.
That takes
Hey,
work.
by the way, Jeb, I just thought of this. You could call that message engineering.
Yep. Message engineering. I
And
like that.
here would be a good example. I was message engineering a verbal script, but this could have been also for written. And the idea was this client was trying to call existing customers to offer a new opportunity or service that they were doing. So the way their track was, it was like, hey, Jeb, this is Brian with the Constance Group. How are you doing today? The problem is Jeb is hearing, like, remember Charlie Brown? Wah,
Yep.
wah, 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 after that, because in your mind, how are you doing today? How am I going to get off this call? What's the easiest way to end this conversation as quickly as possible? That's it. As opposed to they were selling a security, ransomware security audit. So I could say, hey, Jeb, this is Brian at the Constance Group. Your name came up this morning in a security discussion.
Yeah.
Now you're going to be like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? When I say ransomware attacks, does that ring a bell? As opposed to as you're aware? Because no matter if you answer it, well, yeah, it does. Then I say, oh, that's awesome. Then you know. And if you say no, I could be like, well, then I'm glad I got a hold of you. Here's what's going on. So that message engineering that you're talking about, that is sorry, I had my sword in my hand. When you were talking, I got my sword and shield right here. So, but that is truly an overlooked piece of the pie. We're so, anytime I have clients that they'll say, oh, well, it's the number game, make calls. I'm like, that's all you're doing is alienating people. I mean, sure, a blind squirrel will get a nut every now and then, but what's most important is being very precise, to use your language. And by doing that, you're going to have a higher chance of selling.
But it is that trigger, like it's the thing that's going to grab their attention. So we use because statements, part of fanatical prospecting, but that because statement's got to be, I want to meet with you because, and that because has got to be something that triggers your brain to say, this is why I want to meet with you, not my particular reason for meeting with you. So I love that.
I was looking over my shoulder, Jeb, because I don't want to get up and walk out. I have fanatical prospecting right here.
Very good.
Yeah, it's on my bookshelf.
Speaking of engineering, so message engineering, these days, prompt engineering has become a big deal with AI. And I'm seeing when I say horrific, I mean tragic messages that I'm getting from salespeople who are dropping something into AI. It pulls out something that's supposed to be personalized to me, and then they copy paste it into an email and send it. And some of them are not even doing that very well. There's parts that I know that they wrote, and there's parts that I know the robot wrote, and it's failing. It's failing at an epic scale. So much so that they're about to change the email rules for salespeople because of the way that it's failing.
Jeb, let me tell you how bad it is. This is from this morning, our Zoom, our staff meeting. Okay. So we did an AI summary of, put it in there. Check this out. During the meeting, I said, I got to find where it is. During the meeting, I said that I needed to quickly run to the restroom, so if they could just hold on. Here's what the AI took from that. It said, Brian had to leave the meeting prematurely due to a problem with diarrhea.
It's crazy, classic. Isn't it? It is nuts.
Imagine I send that to the client because I was like, oh, I got these nice notes.
I know. So I'm back to, you've got to learn how to communicate and write. You can't rely on robots to do that for you. And I want to get your opinion on this. Is the last thing that we talk about is that I heard Chris Beall say this, and I've repeated this multiple times, that in the age of AI, when anything can be faked by a robot, that the only real communication that human beings can trust is what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Talking in real time.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that statement and what that means to you, and leave us with your best advice for salespeople to hone, build, and grow their communication skills.
To me, what that means, Jeb, is we forget that we're all the same. And I know that's a cliche, but we all have the same fears. We all have the same desires for the most part. And it's okay to be human. That, it's okay. I don't say I'm sorry. I always say, please forgive me. It's more endearing, and it's genuine. I think when we lose our authenticity and we try to be what other people want us to be, and it is when we start going down a slippery slope. And to be okay with, I'm not perfect. I'm struggling. Ask for help. I think that's where you're going to find the success personally and professionally. And I also believe I just did a little video for Instagram and LinkedIn this weekend when I was overseas. And if you take someone and they're dying, we're all going to be there at some point, not to bring this thing down, but it doesn't matter what you offer them in terms of success or jobs or houses or all these things. All they want is their life. And that's what we have right now. We have what it is that we really want at the end of our life right now. And we can't lose sight of that. I think work is a vocation. It's what we do, but connecting with people is really not just important, but it's necessary to have fulfillment. And you mentioned a little while ago about your why. Why do you do what you do? I don't have to enjoy, just like marriage. I don't get along with my wife every day. She's the minister of home affairs here. She's in charge, and my boss at work as well, which are mutually exclusive. But at the end of the day, why do we do what we do? And she just booked us a beach house for 10 days this summer. And I was like, well, I don't know if I can, take off. You've had this conversation. I know you have. And the reality is, she says, I think you're confusing. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If we don't have these moments and these memories with our family, nothing else matters. That's my why. And I can't lose sight of that. And I might lose a gig, might not be able to, give it to a friend. Right.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, that's the biggest advice: is be who you are, be okay with that. No, you're not going to be Baskin Robbins, and I'm going to be mint chocolate chip. That's me. And that's what I'm going to stick with.
That is powerful. Thank you. That was beautiful. I'm glad that you ended it that way. That was a good lesson. I know that people can find out more about having you come speak to their groups at brianparsley.com. Tell me, or tell us, how else people can connect with you.
Well, for me, Jeb, I like to eat and love to do those things. But for me, I just want to give value. I follow you on LinkedIn and Instagram. I don't know if you manage your stuff, but I'm commenting quite a bit. But all my channel, LinkedIn and Instagram, are short 20-second videos of just giving value, or on LinkedIn, 1-minute reads. I don't sell. I don't solicit. I don't send emails. It's all just about giving. And hopefully one day somebody sees something that resonates in a way, but it's Brian Parsley Speaker. All the channels are exactly the same. And I'm always honored that if somebody can get some. And by the way, can I just close with this? I don't know if you feel this way, but there's been many times that I'll do a little 20-second video on something or write something, and I go, I don't know, if anybody's going to really even resonate with that. And it's funny because it's that one time that doesn't perform well. Maybe you only get 500, likes or whatever. But it's that one person will send a direct message and say, you have no idea how much I needed to hear that today. I'm struggling with whatever. And then that's that why again. It goes, okay, so it's not about, I've had videos that had 37 million views, but more, not business, but more personal stuff. But I sit there now, I have this skewed view of what's successful online, right? Where it used to be, if I got 6 likes, I'd be okay. But again, it's not about the likes, it's about the impact.
That's true. And I think everything in life's about the impact. And yes, I do manage my own social media channels, and I do see your comments, and I appreciate them. Thank you.
And I love, by the way, what actually endeared me, because I've been following you for a long time, back when Fanatical Prospecting came out. And I want to say that was, don't correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going out of risk here, but that was around 2008 or so.
15.
Is that all? Okay. 2015. Okay. But I remember it coming out because I remember having that on my desk. And what I actually enjoyed just as much is like when you went horseback riding and you were doing a video in Africa and you were doing the video from inside your tent. And because it gives you this connection of like, wow, he actually is like me,
Yeah.
and not so much this character you see online.
Yep. Very good. And I think that's important. I think it's important to show people that. I did one the other day, go on my struggles with managing my weight over time. And I struggled to even put that up there. I'm like,
Oh,
it's just,
you walking in the airport.
yeah,
I thought about
yeah,
you yesterday at Heathrow. I had a
yep,
5-hour layover and I go, I'm going to walk,
yep,
and it makes a huge difference. Or you taking a sunset cruise with your wife. And it's
yep.
like, wow, I need to do that. Like I'm reading your stuff. So like it's inspiring.
The airport thing has been phenomenal. And I can't even tell you how many people have like just said, I've saw this video and I've started walking in the airport, and I was in DFW. I had a major air problems. And so I'm in between, I got 2 hours and I'm just walking through DFW, walking through the crowd. And this cat comes toward me and he's walking and he goes, Jeb Blount. I go, yeah. He goes, I'm walking in the airport just like you. And I mean, the complete and utter stranger that have no idea that you would ever touch. But the walking in the airport thing is, it's been a big deal.
Well, I'm going to do one on Cinnabons.
I love it. Very good. Hey, Brian,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I know that this has been, we have tried so hard to get this thing going, and I'm so appreciative and thankful for you. What a beautiful message. I knew that you would, you'd bring the heat. And folks, I want you to go check out Sales Gravy University. If you got a team of people, go check out the Team Hub. There's really nothing else like that. It's a place for your entire team to get together. You can take on-demand courses, live courses. And if you're an individual, check out our All Access Pass. But check out we've got more than 40 speakers, trainers, experts, authors who are creating content on this platform. There really isn't anything like it. It is truly the most powerful sales training engine on earth. And if you've never taken a course before, go to learn.salesgravy.com, learn.salesgravy.com. Use the code free course. One of these days, Brian, I'm going to be able to get that out all the way without making a mistake. Use the code free course and sign up for your first course on Sales Gravy. We'll see you next time on the Sales Gravy Podcast.